the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town, of New York town.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talkin Mets at Rob with another Mets Hot Stove live right here on the channel. Running solo here tonight, so hopefully everybody enjoys the show, and hopefully we get into spring training with maybe a new face or two, depending on if we're going to get another bat, another bullpen arm, and of course, we get to complain about our team during spring training, during the season, and the next time I speak to you, it will be the month of spring training, and that's all we need and all we hope for, because it is always hope and a hopefulness and excitement, even when you go into spring training, even if you don't really believe that they did a good job this offseason, or you thought they did a good job, bad job, doesn't really matter. You go into spring training with excitement, couple of new faces, couple of young kids that have an opportunity to make this team. There's so many opportunities on this ball club where you want to see improvement. We know about third base with Brett Beatty. We want to see Francisco Alvarez take the next step. We want to see Edwin Diaz come back healthy. We want to see what this pitching rotation can do when you really consider that maybe Senga could be an ace, but he could be a really solid number two. Yet he is our best pitcher. Can our rotation stay healthy? Is the bullpen good enough? There's a lot of reclamation projects in our bullpen. Can they do something and make it better than what it was last year? So before we get started with the topics, hopefully everybody is doing good. Hopefully everybody is joining their last day in January. Tomorrow is February 1st, and we're going into the nitty-gritty, and there's so many free agents still available. I think there's about 120 free agents that are still available 2 weeks before pitchers and catchers report. And that is something that is just insane to me. Baseball's got to do something about it. So don't forget, guys, to please hit on that like button. And if you're a new subscriber of the channel, please say what's up in the chat. You will get a shout out. And if you're not a subscriber, or you just subscribe, or you're not a subscriber, or you already subscribed and you're coming back for more, I do appreciate all you guys' support throughout the offseason. It has been a tough go of it. It has been very hard to bring you any new information or information that the Mets have signed, or even baseball in general. Not a lot has happened except for the Dodgers getting everybody and their mother during this offseason. Everybody else is seeming like they're shopping at the Dollar Tree this offseason and not wanting to give any type of money and long-term deals to these free agents that are still out there. Bellinger still hasn't got an offer. Apparently, Snell has only got one offer from the Yankees. Montgomery is still praying that Texas can get that cable TV money so we can go back to Texas. There's a lot of variables to look at, but we are here to talk about our Mets. Again, on one side of the screen, you're going to see the upcoming dates for our New York Mets, February 14th, pitches and catches report. The next day, February 15th, full squad workout. The whole entire team is, it's a mandatory team workout, so the whole team will be there the next day. February 24th is spring training opening day. Now I got the date right. March 15th is a spring breakout game where the best prospects in each organization, they play against another team. Best prospects in the organization. The Mets will be playing the Washington Nationals on March 15th. So the best prospects of the Mets will be playing in that ball game. That's going to be very fun. A little bit of outside the box thinking here for Rob Manfred, which is very far and few between. And of course, March 28th is opening day for our boys in orange and blue and sometimes black. All right, guys. So let's talk about the news that we heard today. Wandy Peralta, 4 years, $16.5 million, going to the San Diego Padres. And I know, and I know I'm a little lagging. I think I'm lagging a little bit, but I hope you guys can still hear me and everything's coming in clearly on your end. I'm never giving a guy who's a middle reliever a multi-year deal no more than 2 years. Giving a middle reliever 3 years or more, regardless of the money, is not a good way to spend your resources if you're any team. I don't think any type of long-term 3, 4, 5 years is worth it for a middle reliever unless you're a closer. If you're a closer, different story. That guy is your main guy, is the guy that you're going to trust to go out there in the biggest moments, in the biggest spots for saves, and to keep the game close, maybe get it to extra innings, stuff like that. Middle relievers, I don't like to give 3 or 4 years to, 2 at max if you need to. And it seems like Wandy Peralta, and everybody believed that Wandy Peralta was either going to go to the Mets or the Yankees, and he ended up going to neither. You know why? Because as much as we don't like the Yankees, we got to give credit to Brian Cashman. Brian Cashman doesn't give no long-term deals to any relievers, and he rarely gives it to closers, but he's willing to give it for a closer, but not a middle reliever, because middle relievers are a crapshoot. I don't care what the name is. There's a guy that could have a 6 ERA last year that can have a 3 AR this year, and a guy like Aaron Loup, who the Mets had, who had his best year of his career, one of the best ERAs in the bullpen in Major League Baseball, was absolutely dog crap with the Angels when he signed that deal. The fact of the matter is, did I want Wandy Peralta? Yes, because I'm a big proponent of having 2 lefties in the bullpen. I don't know if the Mets see it that way. I believe if they see it as a right-hander can get lefties and righties out, it's just as good as having a lefty. I don't necessarily agree, but if you look around baseball, they don't really see, especially with the 3-batter rule, they don't really see as 2 lefty as a priority anymore in the bullpen as much. And if you look at the Mets and the Yankees, the Brewers and the Yankees, the 2 best bullpens in baseball the last couple of seasons, they mostly had right-handed relievers. And again, it's something that I really can't kill David Stearns for, because he's proven throughout his career with the Brewers as GM, he knows how to build bullpens, even if we don't like the way he goes about it. Wandy Peralta, I was a little upset about, but again, a 4-year deal. I know it's for about $4.25 million per year, but given extended amount of years, multi-year deals to relievers, middle relievers who is not a closer, is never a smart business investment for these guys, because again, even though Wandy Peralta has been good, bullpen guys are just fickle. They just can be good one year and bad the other. And that's why I think that when people go crazy about the bullpen, as long as you got your closer that you don't have to worry about, and the Mets don't have to worry about that with Edwin Diaz. Now, it could be a little bit of an issue bridging to Edwin Diaz, either if it's going to be Jorge Lopez or Brooks Raley. I think it's going to be a combination. I think they're going to do matchups. I think if the most – now, this is Mendoza now. I don't know what analytics say. When Buck Showalter was running the team, he put Diaz in the most important situation. Didn't matter if it was the 8th or the 9th. He put him in that situation. Now, a lot of people didn't agree with that, but it worked out in 2022 a lot of the times. And that's something that you have to look at going forward. But again, they look up matchups now. They don't look at, this guy is supposed to be for the 7th. This guy is going to be the 8th. This guy's going to be the 6th. They don't really have roles anymore, inning roles. They have matchup roles now. So that's something that we really have to look at. But unfortunately, Wandy Peralta is going out west to the San Diego Padres, 4 years, $16.5 million. So that's one guy that we are not going to get. And there's guys like Matt Tone, there's guys Dykeman, there's a couple of guys that are still available that I think the Mets, can still get if they're in their price range. I think the problem wasn't the money. I think the problem was the years with Wandy Peralta. Before we get to the next topic, let me just make sure I say what up to everybody in the chat. We got Ryan, we got CP. What's up, Chris? How you doing? We got Joel, we got Alien. Hey, Alien, what's up, buddy? Yeah, Alien, you know what? Every time, they seem like a sure thing, but the Dodgers have been a sure thing for many, many years, and they continue to fail. Unless it's not the pandemic years. Daniel, who else we got? We got Ron, Duran, we got Sanders. How you guys doing? Make sure you hit on that like button. Yeah, Ryan, I agree. Peralta was good, but again, given a middle reliever multi-year deals, and I believe the deal has opt-outs every year, if I'm not mistaken, but still, that puts the team in a bad situation, because if he has a good year, he's going to opt out, and then he got to figure that role out all over again. If he has a bad year, now you're stuck with him for that money. And again, it's not the money. I don't like giving middle relievers multi-year deals. If they're not the closer, it's stupid to give any reliever more than 2 years. And I think, Wandy Peralta wanted security. The years are security. If he pitches badly, he's got $4.25 million coming his way. So it's just the way they think about it. Again, I don't care what anybody says. Again, you can give me 5 or 6 known guys that we know of name-wise in the bullpen, and I can probably guarantee you that they're probably not going to be as good as advertised. I think that's something that we have to realize. That, again, I keep on bringing this up because it's absolutely a fact. The Brewers and Yankees have had bullpens that have been extremely good, have been top 2, top 3, top 4 in baseball over the last couple of years. That was with Stearns running things in Milwaukee, with Cashman running things with the Yankees, and they brought in guys that nobody ever heard of, that teams didn't want, or guys that are in the minors that are failed starters that weren't really good, and they turned them into bullpen pieces, and they worked out. Again, is that always going to work out? Well, it's worked out for them over their careers as GMs, and I think that's something to – one thing that I could say that I trust David Stearns with, because I don't know how he's going to be in a market in 2025 when we expect to go after Soto, we expect to keep Alonso, we expect to get a couple of starting pitchers. It's a lot to look at, right? We don't know. But one thing I'm confident in is David Stearns building a bullpen. Again, we don't like the way he's doing it, but we got to give a guy a little bit of confidence and a little bit of patience with the bullpen, because we are a type of fan base, and most fan bases are, but the Mets fan base in general is very quick to jumping to conclusions, right? Again, the fan base, I thought, was going to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge at the trade deadline because they thought it was the most absurd thing that the Mets sell at the deadline when it was the right thing to do. And really, after a week later after the deadline, people started to calm down and got the emotions out of it and realized that it was a good call by Epler and company to do what they did to acquire assets, knowing that this team was not going to be good enough. And if you look, Scherzer was getting worse. Verlander was getting better. But again, when you were able to get what you wanted for Verlander, you got rid of him. And you got, a couple of other prospects for Pham and Escobar and Canna and all that as well. And it helped you get a top 5 farm system in baseball going into this offseason. So, again, I do think you have to understand that David Stearns, at the very least, I'm not telling you to trust him when it comes to, is he going to give that big contract to a player? Are they really going to go after Juan Soto, even though I believe that Steve Cohen is going to step in with this Juan Soto situation, because I think he's been gearing up for that ever since he started to own this team. He was going to be preparing for this offseason, which was supposed to be Ohtani. And obviously, more and more as the years were going by, it was kind of obvious that Ohtani was going to stay on the West Coast. And I think Steve Cohen realized that. And next year, I think Steve Cohen's going to step in with this Juan Soto situation and probably even the Pete Alonso situation. So I'm confident in what Stearns can do and what he's been proven to do year after year after year. The GM as the Brewers was build a bullpen with guys that, if you look at the Brewers and the guys they brought in, the guys that they brought in over the years, I took a little quick look at it. Again, I didn't go really hard deep into it. But again, if you really look, I was looking at a couple of guys throughout the years. Those are guys that were on either other teams or were free agents or guys that were released by other teams with 4.5 ERAs, 5 ERAs. Some guys that had really good stuff, but just couldn't put it all together. And they got into the right hands in the right situation, and you put them in the right spots, and they turn out to be better than what they were throughout their career. Or if they were good at one point, they struggled until they got to either the Brewers or with the Brewers, and then they figured things out. I think the problem with a lot of relievers right now is the fact that the roles need to be determined a little bit more. I think too many times these guys are so set in their ways, and you can blame the pitchers all you want for this, but this is baseball as a whole. This is the way organizations bring these guys up, right? They need roles. They need to know that they are got to be ready. Like Buck Showalter used to say this a lot. He used to tell some of the guys in the bullpen, listen, be ready. We might be using you tonight. A lot of the times guys need to be knowing that they're going to be pitching that day or be prepared to pitch on that day. And I think putting them in certain spots, like Jorge Lopez, right? He hasn't been good. The last time he was good, he was the closer for the Orioles and had a great season. So the stuff is there, right? His problem was he used to be a high strikeout guy, but when you lose control over your certain pitches, you're going to walk more guys. And then when you walk more guys, things get tense, a little bit more pressure. So what you're going to do, you're going to make mistakes. Guys are going to put bat on ball. I think there's a lot of ways you can look at it. But one thing I'm confident in is that David Stearns knows how to build a bullpen. He's got a keen eye for this stuff. And I do think that he is smart enough to realize that when there's a rotation that are question marks, let's be honest about that. But when you got a lot of guys that are 5-6 inning guys, you need guys. And again, everybody can talk about Adam Ottavino all you want. He had a good season. Everybody wants Ryan Stanek, and people are like, oh, why didn't you get Ryan Stanek over Adam Ottavino? Look at the year they had. A guy like Ryan Stanek is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Why do people want Ryan Stanek when he had a 4 ERA last year? His walks were up, his strikeouts were down. So everybody wanted him. You know why? Because he's a new face. But yeah, people don't realize how bad he was and how the Astros didn't even use him in big spots a lot last year until they had to, especially in the postseason. And we have to remember that. And then Adam Ottavino, again, he has problems holding people on. That's his entire career. That hasn't changed. But you know what? Nobody gave a damn about stolen bases when he was pitching to a low 2 ERA in 2022. And we act like that he is all of a sudden not a good pitcher. People want Ryan Stanek because it's a new face. That's it. He wasn't better than Adam Ottavino last year. He just wasn't. It's not, Joel, because the fact of the matter is when you have a 3.21 ERA as a reliever, that's considered a good reliever. Again, people are giving me names all over the place and commenting about it and sending me messages and everything like that. And I continue to say, why do you want those guys? They weren't better than certain guys that they brought in. Again, I would take Ryan Stanek in a heartbeat, right? But to say that I'm going to take him over Adam Ottavino, why? You told me the last time we spoke and you were in the chat, you says, oh, because he has a big arm. Okay. I can name 50 guys that have big arms that suck. Big arms mean nothing to me. The fact of the matter is, Stanek had almost a full run more ERA, meaning that he put people on base and couldn't get the job done. That means more runners scored when he was on the mound. He didn't leave him stranded. Adam Ottavino, he might have a problem last year with walking guys, not striking out as much people. And yes, he gave up stolen bases, but he did strand a lot of those guys because a fact is a fact. Earned runs means he didn't give up those runs. If he had a 3.21 ERA and Stanek had a 4.09 ERA, guess what? That means Stanek didn't strand those runners. He let those runs come in. Ottavino didn't the majority of the time. Again, the good thing about this Ottavino thing, and I want to make this clear, Ottavino is not going to be an 8th inning guy. All right, he's going to be a 6th, 7th inning guy. Rarely, Jorge Lopez is probably going to be a 7th, 8th inning guy. And again, Adam Ottavino in the 6th or the 7th inning, probably 5th, 6th, 7th inning, is where he belongs. The problem with Ottavino last year was because we were using him in a spot that he shouldn't have been in because of the Diaz injury. We were using him as a setup man. He's not made for that. And I completely agree with that. And Joe, we agreed the last time as well. The 8th inning is probably going to be Jorge Lopez. Unless the Mets do get Stanek, then maybe we can talk about it because, yes, he does have a big arm. I like his attitude. He's a badass. But that badass with the big arm also gave up a ton of runs, and his strikeouts were down when his walks are up. So, again, we'll see. Well, Mike, if you believe that this is the worst offseason since even with the Wilpons, then you clearly haven't been paying attention. Because the last time I checked, a couple of years ago, I think Brody Van Wagenen was the GM. Jed Lowry was our big offseason acquisition. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to go back to those days, go ahead. So be it. But I didn't hear you bitching and complaining when they traded for Lindor, when they signed Starlin Marte, Escobar, Cano, Scherzer, Verlander. Nobody complained because nobody knew the outcome. Of course, the outcome, you can be the Monday morning quarterback and say, oh, I knew it wasn't going to work out. No, you didn't. Yeah, well, what can you do? All right, guys, let's get to the next one. And I want to really get into the Vientos project because if the Mets don't get another bat, which I still believe that JD Martinez is going to fall into the Mets' lap because if you look at the way things are rolling here, especially with Toronto getting Turner and that bat going away, there's more and more teams that don't need a guy that is just a stagnant DH, what JD Martinez is. He's a DH and nothing else, right? And more I look at it, there's less and less teams that are going to be willing to spend money on a guy that is just a DH. And I feel like even though the Mets might not actually want to go after a bat and want to give Vientos a lot of at-bats, if JD Martinez is kind of there a couple of days before spring training, you might be able to swoop in for a 1-year, $9-10 million contract and get him just by that. And I'm not saying that as like any rumors or anything like that. I'm just saying the way the outlook is looking over here, and a lot of teams look like they're basically done. And the teams that are probably looking for something are mostly pitching. And the guys that I thought were looking for a bat got those guys already. And I think it's very interesting because I think JD Martinez is going to fall into the Mets' lap. And I'd rather them just go out there and get him. But if he falls into the lap, he's wearing orange and blue, I can kill ass how they got him. But I would really look at the fact that because Jorge Soler is probably a little bit outside the range for the Mets, because I don't think they want to give a multi-year deal for a guy who's not a very good defensive outfielder, but brings a power bat. I think that is still far-fetched. But again, the JD Martinez 1 year, $10 million is very, very likely because even Justin Turner, who is going to be mostly DH, but can also play the field at a pretty good rate, he got, what, $13 million. So, just a DH who can only hit, I doubt he's going to get more than that. And even with a year in 2021, in 2022, he was only getting $10 million from the Dodgers. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And, if they want to use Vientos, that's fine. I think they were projecting around 14 and 16 home runs for Vientos this year. I think Fangraph had. Again, do I think Vientos can show something? I don't know. I don't know what more at bats it's going to help. My problem is that if they don't get another bat and Vientos is not the guy, who are they going to go to? They're going to go to DJ Stewart? So it's not like they got, bats that are going to make you get excited about. Maybe Vientos is a guy that needs a lot of at bats, and when he sees more pitching, is going to get better. I mean, that's all you can hope for at this point because he's not a good fielder. So you don't want him. If he's playing the field, that means something disastrous happened. If he's playing third base, that means either Batty got hurt or Batty is absolutely dog crap. And that's what we don't want. So we just have to wait and see when it comes to that, unfortunately. But when it comes to Vientos, I do like the fact that he was working out with Lindor in the offseason. He's getting, he's working out in the gym. He's already at the spring training facility. Batty is too. If you haven't watched a lot of the Mets videos on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it. They both been working out in the facility. They're already there. That's nice to see. So, listen, I'm not giving Batty the job, but I think Batty is probably the guy that knows. And I'm telling you right now, the Mets are not going to be shy about these guys to tell them, listen, if you don't perform, there's a guy that's going to take your place. And if that's the guy, a prospect in the minors, or that's going to be somebody on the bench is going to take your job. And I think this spring training is very crucial for Brett Batty. And I'm not just talking about home runs. I'm talking about a guy that I need to see to hit. I want his hard hit rate to go up. I want him to lift the ball. I want to see a little bit more launch angle swing from Brett Batty. He is the guy that is a line drive hitter, a gap-to-gap hitter who has hit too many balls on the ground. It's weird because when he gets to the minors, he lifts the ball and he's crushing the ball all over the place in the gaps, over the wall. When he gets back to the big leagues, he hits ground balls. And it's just weird. Is he a quadruple A player? I know, Shay. Sorry, my cat's a little under the weather. I know, buddy. Sorry, guys. I know. He's got a little cold. He's on medic. Oh, I know. See, even he don't like Vientos. I know, Shay. I know. Yeah, I know. My he's under the weather a little bit. He got a little kitty cold. You're not gonna throw up on me, are you? I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, he's been going through it. He's been sneezing. Took him to the vet and all that stuff. So got a little kitty cold, right? Right, buddy? See, even he's upset about the Mets. So no, Joel, and I don't think the Mets are expecting him to be any type of decent fielder at all. I think they're looking at him just for pure at bats. So again, I hope with the at bats he'll get better. But again, how is he going to get better? Is he going to hit for average? Like, somebody's got to be the protection behind Pete Alonso. Are they really thinking that Vientos is going to be the guy that's going to be batting fifth behind Pete Alonso? Oh, that's cool, Alien. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Again, I was going to get a feral cat, but there was an adoption center that was not too far from me that I just went there one day and I sat down with a room full of cats, and this guy was the only one that came up to me. So I took him home. So, all right. So with Vientos, again, if he is the guy that the Mets really want to get a lot of at-bats and he's going to be the DH, fine. But there's got to be a short leash with you guys. Like, if Vientos isn't doing it, Are you really going to give the DH position to DJ Stewart? I don't know, and that's what worries me a little bit, because I think Vientos does have the power. He's shown it, but you have to show it in the big league, right? He's shown in games and spurts that he has some power. He looks good at the plate. That's why I don't like to really go crazy in September when these guys were actually performing better. That really doesn't do anything for me. I think September is one of those months that you got to be careful how you look at it, especially with a team that's out of it and that's running through the motions. I always worry about that because there's no pressure at all for any of these guys. That's why when people are like, oh, look at Alonso's numbers, look at McNeil's numbers, look at this guy's numbers, Nimmo, this guy, I don't care. September with no pressure, you should be able to perform. That shouldn't be get Met fans excited or say, hey, look at this, right? Because I remember in 2022 September, when there was pressure, they folded like a cheap shoe. That's my problem. So Vientos, Batty, I think Batty got one shot here. I think he's going to perform well in spring training. You know why? Because he's done it already. I think he's going to perform well. You're going to hear Met fans going, oh, I told you about Brett Batty. And then when he goes 0-for-4 on opening day, they're going to start killing him again. I was so pissed off at the Mets when I was at spring training last year. I went to that intra-squad game. Me and Hayden were there. It was the white jerseys against the blue jerseys. Brett Batty was the best player. Him and Mauricio were the best players on that team. Batty made some excellent plays at third base. He was hitting the ball all over the place, just like Ronnie Mauricio with the glove and the bat. Brett Batty looked like one of the best players. You would think he's the best prospect in the Mets farm system. That's how good he was. My thing was, I think what really hurt Brett Batty, and I blame the Mets on this, because Escobar was there and Buck Showalter and Billy Epler were so keen on giving these veterans every opportunity to have these jobs, no matter through thick or thin. Batty not making the opening day roster pissed me off. Brett Batty deserved to make the roster coming out of spring training because he was that good. And I think that messed with his head a little bit. Again, that shouldn't be an excuse because he had opportunities to prove himself and prove everybody wrong. He didn't. So, in my opinion, with Vientos and Batty, kids, you're getting an opportunity. You got a GM that believes in giving young guys a chance. And again, remember, this is Stearns' first chance of giving these guys a chance. Now, if he's paid attention, I don't believe he's going to give him a big leash here because there's other guys in the farm system that are right up their ass that are going to get opportunities. So I do think that Brett Batty and Vientos, if the Mets don't get another bat, specifically in Vientos' situation, they're going to give him the opportunity. But how long is that leash? That's what I'm thinking right now. Joel said Cohen spoiled the Mets fans and acted arrogant a bit. That did not help. Cohen is finding out that being an owner is not going crazy. Absolutely true, Joel. But you know what? I said this before a couple of streams ago. If Cohen would have came in as a new billionaire owner, the richest owner in baseball, and tore it all down and saying we're building from scratch, we're trading everybody, and that means Alonso and McNeil and Nimmo and DeGrom at the time, and he would have done that without making the Lindor trade and blew it all up and saying, I'm starting from scratch. I want this to be brand new, front office, players, everything. Starting from scratch. Everybody would have destroyed him. He couldn't do anything else but what he did. And let's be honest, the only thing he lost was money, right? That's why I don't understand why Met fans were so mad in 21 and 22. You know, besides the Pete Crow Armstrong trade for Javi Baez, it's basically the only big prospect he really gave up in his tenure, right? All he did was spend money. So to get mad at an owner that tried to win by spending money, by bringing in veterans, because that's all you can do nowadays. You spend money to bring guys that are 30 years or older. That's the way free agency is now. The fact of the matter is, if Steve Cohen would have came in here and blew it up when he took over as the owner of the Mets, Met fans would have destroyed him. You think it's bad now and Met fans are pissed off? They would have never forgave him for what he done. Because if he would have broke everything down and threw everything out the window, traded everybody and blew it up, that would have been a 3 to 5 year plan the opposite way than what he was talking about. So that arrogance, that confidence, that money spending son of a bitch that we have as an owner, that was the only thing he could do because he didn't hurt this organization at all. Because he built the farm system by spending the money without hurting your farm system. So for anybody who's like, oh, why would you get 40-year-olds, 39-year-olds? You know why? Because those were the best guys on the market. As much as you thought Scherzer wasn't going to be good, he was the best pitcher in baseball in the first half of 2022 before he got hurt. All right. Verlander was coming off a Cy Young. Starlin Marte was excellent in 2022. Nobody cared about that 4-year deal when he was one of the best players on the team. And you saw what happened with Marte without him being in the lineup at the end of 2022 in September when he got hurt. And then you saw what happened to this lineup without Marte basically the entire season in 2023. The fact of the matter is, if you're going to kill Steve Cohen for spending money with an organization that was millions of dollars in debt because of the Wilpons, who never gave a shit about their farm system, that didn't have any pitching prospects or any prospects in general be on the team and come up and have a long tenure with this organization, they were the last in baseball with the amount of prospects, minor leaguers they brought up into the major leagues. You know why? Because their drafting was bad. Their development was bad. They put no money into the organization. And if you haven't been to spring training, I've been going to spring training since 2018. Every year, except for the COVID year. Every year. I went a couple of years when the Wilpons still owned the team, and then every year since Cohen owned the team. If you look at the spring training facility, when I went there in 18 and 19, you wouldn't even recognize it today because of the fact that he put so much money into the facilities, all new stuff for the players, all beautiful fitness facilities, the lab, the fields are redone, everything's done. They got so many different areas where players can work on their game, so many different things that can help make them better. The Wilpons didn't care about that. The Wilpons hope and prayed every single season that somebody turned up, that somebody turned out good, so they can pat themselves on the back and say, look, we did that. The fact of the matter is that Cohen did what he thought Met fans wanted. Because, again, if he would have blown it up when he first took over this team, Met fans would have killed him. Because if he would have blew everything up, traded everybody, and started from scratch, it would have been a 3 to 5 year window of losing probably 85, 90, 100 games, being probably the couple of worst teams in baseball, and building your team up. So I understand why people are upset, but we have to understand that the guy tried to win by spending money without hurting the farm system. He succeeded on that part. It didn't work out. All it was losing money out of his pocket and some misery for us as fans. But if this was the Wilpons, we would be in a world of shit right now because they wouldn't sign Pete Alonso. They probably would have never re-signed Brandon Nimmo. Who knows about Lindor? It would have been a total different situation. And we have to realize that sometimes. And I know the offseason isn't exactly how we cut it out to be. But as I said, probably every stream, we're looking at it from the wrong perspective. Don't look at it from a 162 game perspective. Look at it to an 82 game perspective. Look at just the first couple of months before the deadline. That's where you got to focus in on. Don't worry about August, middle of August, August, September. Don't worry about that. The first couple of months before the deadline, That's where you got to get key on, because that's what they're doing. They're playing up for the first half, seeing where they are. If they're in the mix, they'll make moves, right? You got a ton of assets in the farm system. You're not going to be able to put all these guys on the team, on the roster. Some of these guys are going to be assets for trades. If the Mets, listen, could we actually see the core of this team put everybody on their shoulders and saying, hey, guys, let's go. Alonso, McNeil, Nimmo, this is the core. Put Lindor in there as well. Those 4 guys, they got to pick it up. Every one of them. Every one of them. You can't have a bad season with average. You can't have a bad season with home runs. You can't have a bad season with RBIs, OPS. They got to come together as a core and do your fucking job. How about that? Do your job. You get paid to do your job, do your job. Everybody's got to step up. You can't have a terrible month where you're batting under 200, and this goes for a couple of guys that I just talked about of that core. You can't bat 200, and then, we're going to talk about your September when it didn't freaking matter. The fact of the matter is, the core needs to do the job. I don't care who the hell you put around them. If the core doesn't do their job, this team is going nowhere. I don't care how good your team is supposed to be. All right? Because, like I said, 2022 should have never turned out the way it did. Marte being out of the lineup should have never caused this team to spiral out of control when you have Alonso, McNeil, Nimmo, Lindor in that lineup. There is no way that lineup should have spiraled out of control and lose the way they did in September to let the Braves take the division and embarrass themselves against the Padres in the wild card game, in the wild card series. No reason for that. You want to be the names that everybody talks about, the fan favorites, the Nimmos with his smile, the Pete Alonso with the I Love New York batting gloves, McNeil with the flying squirrel, Lindor with his damn colored hair, and, wearing the New York jackets and all that fun stuff and all that craziness. The fact of the matter is, fucking perform when it matters. I can give a shit about your September in 2023 when there's no pressure on you. You could have bat 600 with 25 home runs and 60 RBIs in September. What does that mean if there's no pressure and it doesn't matter? Absolutely nothing. You know when it mattered? In June, when you guys sucked. Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso, McNeil sucked. All of them. Now, they're not the only ones. The pitching had to do something which they never did the entire season. But the fact of the matter was, on June 1st, the Mets were in a wild card spot. The end of June, they were 6 games out of a wild card. That can't happen with a core that everybody loves. At some point, one of these guys or a couple of these guys got to close the door behind them and saying, guys, follow me. Because where the fuck are the leaders on this team? I talk about this all the time. Everybody, I love Alonso, I love Nimmo, I love McNeil, I love Lindor. I want to see leaders on this team. Because when the stuff hits the fan, the best players, the leaders, perform in the biggest spots. Not when the wins don't matter and the months don't matter. Because after June, if you believed any of those games mattered, you're not paying attention. June was the month where somebody had to put that team on their shoulders. And I'm talking about Lindor. I'm talking about Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, somebody. Somebody's got to grow a pair and put their team on their back. Because if you don't, then if they do sign Pete Alonso, then you're stuck with a core that everybody loves, but are losers. Prove it. How about that? I don't want to hear the excuses. I don't want to hear about the managers. I don't want to hear about analytics, and they gave us too much information. Put the bat on the fucking ball. How about that? How about that? I don't want to hear about protection in the lineup. If Alonso can hit 40 home runs without protection, he can hit 40 home runs without protection again. But you know what? When you hit 25 of them in August and September, when it doesn't matter, yet you hit your least amount of home runs in June when it mattered, That's a problem. That goes for Lindor with his shitty average in June, with McNeil being non-existent in June, and Nimmo, who had a really good year, struggled a little bit in June. He was actually good enough in June, so I can't really kill Nimmo because he was actually the guy that was actually performing at least close to his capabilities in June. It's just that simple. This core has got to prove that they can win. Because why keep these guys around? I don't care how much you love them. The fact of the matter is, when your team needs you, where were you? Right? I didn't see nobody put this team on their shoulders in 2022 when September was going into a disaster. Starlin Marte not in the lineup shouldn't have caused that spiral. Where was all those guys? Prove it. Right? Stop blaming the manager. Stop blaming the hitting coach. Stop blaming this guy. Stop blaming that guy. Look in the mirror. Because you can hit the 30 home runs. You can hit the 40 home runs. You can have 100 RBIs. You can have a 300 average. But that month that really mattered, and we all know what month that is, they were nowhere to be found. And when they started that month, they were in a wild card spot. They failed, yet they want to get rewarded and praised for August and September that nobody went to Citi Field, nobody watched the games, and nobody cared. All they talked about was extend Pete Alonso, fire Buck Showalter, fire Brody Van Wagenen. Billy Upper, That's all they cared about. Right? So I don't care if they hit 350 in September, hit 10 home runs in September. I don't care. Because in 2022, you didn't do that. And that's when it mattered. In June, you didn't do that. You were losing to shitty teams, losing games with your defense, losing games with pitching, losing games with the bats that you weren't hitting. It's a joke. Yeah, Richard, I agree with that. But you see, here's the problem with that. Lindor was batting what? 210, 207, 216. Yet he picked up that average. McNeil and Alonso didn't. They stood 210, 220 the entire season after April, basically. Right? And you can talk about all you want with Pete Alonso getting hurt. He was already going downhill prior to that injury. The injury didn't help. But by that time, it really didn't matter because he came back, almost near like the third week in June when the Mets were already spiraling out of control. And again, you can't help with injury. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just one guy, right? There's multiple guys on there that are really good players. Some of them are all-stars. You gotta put these guys on your back. If you're counting on Canna last year or Escobar or Beatty or God knows who else to pick up the slack when you're the guys that are supposed to be the core of this team, then something's wrong. Because either you're not a leader, you're not the big player on this team, even though you should be the best player or two on this team. You can't be looking over your shoulder for Mark Canna to do the job. I better not see Pete Alonso, McNeil, or Nimmo looking for Harrison Bader or Joey Wendell or DJ Stewart to pick up the slack, or Beatty or Alvarez. They're the core of this team. You got the big contracts. Do your job. That's the way I see it. All right, so Vientos, they want to give him a lot of bats. How big is the leash? We shall see. Yeah, well, Sanders, they might do that. But you know what? If the Mets are playing well in April, you're not going to bring up those guys because you don't want to mess with the chemistry and what's going good there, right? If things are working out and they're pretty good in April, then you don't have to bring up those guys. There's no need to rush them if you don't have to. Well, Eloise, I understand the bullpen was never good last year, but the bullpen wasn't the biggest problem. The problem with the bullpen was that the starters, the first month and a half of the season, didn't go past the sixth inning. I think they didn't get to the sixth inning, through the sixth inning until the middle of May. Well, if you're going to do that for almost 35 to 40 games, to start the season, your bullpen's going to be a disaster regardless. And if you really look at it, you had Ottavino, Raley, and Robertson, who were actually pretty good if you really look at the numbers early on. And then when the end of May came, they already had the most innings in the league by that point. And of course they're going to struggle. You use them every single day, and you got to keep on going to your trusted guys because, well, Diaz ain't there. So everybody's got to move up a step. And by the time June came, your bullpen shot. Yeah, your starting pitcher might have got a little bit healthier and better for a little bit with Verlander and Senga, but that wasn't enough because at that moment, your bullpen was done. So even if you had leads going into your 7th or 8th inning, the guys were already exhausted and already pitched a tremendous amount of innings in the first 2 months. And now the bullpen's struggling because they got to catch up. Now your rotation's a little bit better, not great, but a little bit better. And now you got to count on your offense to score runs. And in June, the offense was putrid. And if you look at the pitching numbers in June, it wasn't bad. Wasn't great, but it was good enough to keep your teams in ball games. And that was the issue. So it was everything went wrong. You can pick every month where something went wrong. If the starting pitcher was doing good, the lineup didn't do nothing. If the bullpen was a disaster, the starting pitcher was good. The lineup was doing good, the pitching sucked. It was just a disaster all ways around, and it's really hard to just, pinpoint one thing. But in June, everything went bad. Nothing was really good at all. All right, so the next thing I know, people were talking about that in the chat earlier. Well, John, Noah and Zach was more of the case of the Wilpons. And again, did you want Noah Syndergaard? He hasn't been anything since he left the Mets. So let's not act like Noah Syndergaard's been good. Zach Wheeler was a Wilpon decision, not Steve Cohen. Jacob deGrom, the Rangers won a World Series despite him. Did you want to really give Jacob deGrom that contract? You would be stupid to give up that contract. And they won the World Series without Jacob deGrom. So, Conforto, he didn't really have a good season. He's not the player that everybody expected him to be. So let's not act like these are guys that were like, Zach Wheeler, yeah, but that's a Wilpon decision. So Zach Wheeler, I'd love to have, but the Wilpons didn't want to spend any money. So there's nothing you can do there. Kenneth, I agree. Yeah, see, I talk about this all the time. Yeah, Brody, but it was also the Wilpons as well. Like the Wilpons weren't spending money. We all know that. Right? We all knew that. That's why we wanted to trade. That's why in 2021, I wanted to trade everybody that we needed to trade because they bought at the deadline with a team that wasn't very good. Because if you remember that 2021 season, right after the deadline, we all expected Jacob deGrom to come back. And what happened? He was shut down right after the deadline, not even a week later. So they should have never made that move for Javi Baez. They should have traded Zach Wheeler. And that's what happened, unfortunately. So, all right. So, let's see. Yeah, Eloise, yeah, I understand that. But again, if you're counting on the other 5 that are not your main guys, you shouldn't be counting on your other 5 guys that are the 5th inning guys, the 6th inning guys, the guys that you don't want to use in big spots. The reason why you had to use your 3 guys so much, the trusted guys, because your starting pitcher was done in the 4th and 5th inning. And if you're going to use the guys that you don't really trust, that are not very good, that are on the back end of your bullpen, you're not going to win those ball games. You were trying to win those ball games. You got to use the guys that you can count on. The guys that you can count on were overworked. So, and that comes back to the starting pitching and how bad it was. Well, yes, Richard. Springer was Sandy Alderson. Remember what Sandy Alderson said during that offseason, right? And Realmuto was also Sandy Alderson, by the way. It wasn't Cohen. Remember, that was the first year of Cohen. remember, Cohen wasn't going to be able to buy the team and wasn't going to get the votes from the MLB owners unless he brought a guy in that the owners were confident that they weren't going to, spend tremendous amounts of money right away to get everybody and their mother. That's why Steve Cohen brought in Sandy Alderson, because the owners trusted him. They know he's a even keel guy. Isn't going to make stupid, crazy decisions every single time just to throw money at everything. And Sandy Alderson said it. Springer wanted another year. Remember, he got 7 years from Toronto, and Sandy Alderson didn't want to do it. Real Muto, he said it. He thought he was getting a better deal signing James McCann than Real Muto. He thought Real Muto was going to get well over $100 million, and Sandy Alderson was wrong. That wasn't Cohen. You keep talking about Cohen. That was year one of Cohen, when Cohen's hands were tied, because the owners gave him an ultimatum. Bring in Sandy Alderson, let him run things, and stay in the background. That was the agreement they had. It was widely reported throughout reporters that was the case. I agree, Richard. I agree. All right, so the Mets, according to a lot of reports, Andy Martino, John Heyman, a couple of other guys, that the Mets they were saying keep an eye out on the Mets and Brandon Woodruff. And that would be a situation that it would be a 2-year deal. The first year of that deal, which would be this year where he can't pitch, is going to probably be very minimal money. And it's probably going to be a lot more money on the back end for the second year. I think that would be Richard, but that's not true. That is not true. You got to remember the situation. Again, it's widely reported. Steve Cohen, and remember, that was the same time when the whole strike thing happened and the lockout and all that stuff, and they put the Steve Cohen tax in, was the fact that the owners were only going to approve Steve Cohen as being the owner of the Mets if he hired Sandy Alderson, because the owners knew that Sandy Alderson wouldn't go out and just spend stupid money over and over again for that year to bring in everybody and their mother. You have to remember the circumstances. Again, read all the information you can. Google it. It's widely documented on The Athletic, all the different news reports, everything. Every sports reporter had it. And then Sandy Alderson was demanded by the other owners, or Steve Cohen would never got the ownership of the Mets. And we probably have freaking A-Rod as the owner. Yes, the owner is in charge, but you got to remember why that happened. But yeah, oh, Jesus Christ. Richard, you're not paying attention at all. What happened? Sandy Alderson talked about it right before they thought, Sandy Alderson said he thought the market for Real Muto was going to be well over $100 million. So he pivoted quickly to James McCann for the 4 years, $40 million. Sandy Alderson was wrong because he signed for, I think, just at $100 million or just under $100 million. That's a Sandy Alderson issue. Again, we keep on going back to Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen had nothing to do with that. Steve Cohen was trying to get his respectability from the owners for that first year. Yet, he still made that Lindor trade. We forget about that, right? And then he gave him a contract extension. We forget about that. The fact of the matter is, Sandy Alderson had a huge problem with giving 7-year deals or more than 6 years. He was willing to go 6 years for Springer. He got 7. That's why he went to Toronto. Real Muto, Sandy Alderson thought it was a better value because that's what Sandy Alderson does. He likes value. He thought the value, the high risk, the low risk, high reward, James McCann would have been fine. Turned out not to be. Yeah, Drifter, yeah. God knows. All right, so the Mets are eyeing Woodruff. It probably will be a 2-year deal. Yeah, Richard, I never said the Mets called Realmuto. Sandy, do you listen, Richard? You got to listen. One more time. Sandy Alderson said, I don't care what Realmuto said. Sandy Alderson said he believed that Realmuto's contract was going to be well over $100 million. He was not willing to do that for a catcher. Sandy Alderson said that. That has nothing to do about calling Realmuto. I never said that. The fact of the matter is, Sandy Alderson believed. Now, he was wrong. That's nobody's fault except Sandy Alderson. He said he thought that Realmuto's contract was going to be well over $100 million because he believed multiple teams were going to be in on him. That was going to drive up the price. That's why he pivoted quickly to James McCann. James McCann was signed very early in the offseason. It was about almost 4 weeks later. That's when Realmuto signed. Yeah, Richard, it was about the money because Sandy Alderson was the guy in charge. The owners would not allow Steve Cohen to do anything stupid and drastic that first year. That was the whole reason why they voted him in. That was the contingency. That was the rules for the owners to vote him in, was to stay back in the shadows for this year and bring in Sandy Alderson to run things because they know how even keel. And he's not going to make drastic moves and drastic crazy money spending because Alderson does not do that. That's it. All right, so Woodruff, I think the Mets should sign him. It's not going to help us in 24, but it will help us in 25. Because a lot of people believe that his recovery and with the whole new, I think there's another type of surgery that is with the shoulder now. It's a shoulder capsule injury that there's this new type of surgery. I was reading up on it about a day or two ago when the news came that keep an eye out on Woodruff with the Mets. That there's this new special type of surgery where it's some type of new socket ball, something that a lot of the big time doctors, surgeons are using now, and it has great reviews, and it's supposed to help athletes. And we'll see, it's a new technology. It's a new type of surgery. We'll see how that goes because I think 2 or 3 other pitchers had similar surgeries for Woodruff had an injury that he had, and they really never were the same after that. That's a high risk, low risk, high reward situation that if he does turn out to be good, that's an ace. Woodruff is an ace. So we'll see. So exactly, Joel. We did it with John Curtis. It didn't really work out. He didn't really pitch well for us because he was a pretty good reliever before he got hurt. I think that was a smart move for the Mets. I think it's even smarter to do that for Woodruff because there's a lot of upside if he becomes at least close to the pitcher that he was prior to the injury. So that is interesting to look at. So I want to talk about the rotation a little bit more. About what it's going to look like what's the order going to be? Are they going to do a 5-man, 6-man? I don't think they're going to. I'm thinking more and more. I think if they would have got Yamamoto, they would have went to a 6-man automatically, just to give Yamamoto a little bit extra day coming from Japan. Now that they didn't get Yamamoto, you're not going to give a 6-man rotation and give guys extra days off that are so used to pitching every 5th day. I think that's dangerous. I know you got to keep a couple of guys healthy. You want to keep them on the field. You want to keep them on the mound. But for guys who don't really have the routine of pitching every 6th day, now maybe they started right from spring training and get 4 or 5, maybe even 6 starts throughout spring training, 6-man with a 6-man rotation. Maybe they do it throughout spring, and we'll know really quickly if they're going to do that. Because other than that, you can't just start the season and say, all right, every 6th day you guys are going to start when they didn't do it the whole spring training. That's a dangerous game to play. Now, Senga might benefit from it, but the other pitchers who are so used to pitching every 5th day, even if you want to try to keep them healthy, you might not be able to keep them healthy just by a 6-man rotation because some guys don't like to be much stronger pitching on that 6th day because they feel like their breaking pitchers or their off-speed pitchers have a couple of ticks miles per hour more that hurts their movement on their pitches, and some of them don't like it. So you got to be careful there. You can't help one pitcher to hurt three others. I think that's a dangerous game to play. But as I said many times with this rotation, you need 3 out of your 5. Now, this includes Senga in here. You need 3 out of your other 4 starters to remain healthy. Obviously, Senga has to remain healthy. But from your other 4 guys, I would say, you know what? 2 out of the 4 need to remain healthy. Because if you got 3 out of the 5 pitching every 5th day, that helps your rotation. Because I say this all the time. When your rotation is I would say 75 to 85% healthy, that means you can count on them going every 5th day. You don't have to dig into your depth. You don't have to dig into your bullpen for openers or bring up a guy from the minors to pitch only 3 innings and you got to use your entire bullpen the entire game. The fact of the matter is, if these guys give you innings, there's more of a chance of them giving you a chance to win ball games than having guys like the Reyes of the world, the McGills of the world, the Petersons of the world, guys that you're just throwing in there to pray that they show you something and give you innings and not have to go deep into your 8th, 9th, 10th depth piece every year into your starting pitching. If you remain somewhat healthy in your rotation, at least 3 out of the 5, I think you have a really good shot to protect your bullpen, number 1, and give your offense a chance to win some ball games while your pitchers keep you in ball games. That's what I think with that. With the bullpen, automatically with Diaz, and we'll get to the Diaz projections in a second, and let's roll into that right now. Rolling into the bullpen, into Diaz. The bullpen, with Raley, with Ottavino, and with Diaz on the back end. Now, Jorge Lopez is going to be in that mix somewhere. So I'm going to put those 4 in there. Every other guy, the Drew Smiths, the Sean Reed Foleys, and all the other, the Austin Adams, all those minor league guys, minor league contract guys that are going to get a chance to make this team. They're going to be 15 inning, 16 inning guys. The starter has a bad start. They're going to come in. But Rarely, Lopez, Ottavino, and Diaz. Those are your guys that are going to be your back-end bullpen guys. With Diaz already there, and even if Diaz is not as great as he was in 2022, because it's very hard to repeat a season like that. But if he's close to that and pitches to an under 3 ERA, and his projections that I just looked at from Fangraphs has him at a, 3.09 ERA, 35 saves, pitching in 64 games, throwing about 64, 65 innings. His strikeout rate is tremendous. So if he pitches to around the 3 ERA or just under 3 ERA, that's perfectly fine. Because if you get 30 to 35 saves out of your closer, there's a lot of games, even with Robinson last year. And yes, and Phil Bickford, who I think is going to be a little bit more, he was good last year when we got him from the Dodgers. It's going to be very interesting to see with Phil Bickford. He can fit in that 6th inning role where you might not have to see Drew Smith a lot. Bickford he's a big arm. He throws 97, 98, strong arm, got a nasty slider, so that's good to see as well. But it is very interesting to see that with Diaz, everybody gets pushed back. I don't think you need, it would be great if Diaz could be 2022 Diaz, but don't count on that. But if he pitches to a 2.93 ERA with 35 plus saves, even between 30 and 35, there's a lot of games in there that the Mets didn't win last year because of that situation. Even as good as Robinson was, there was a lot of times where you had to bring him in just a tad bit earlier because you didn't trust nobody else. And I think that's a problem. So 3/5 of your rotation remain healthy. I think their rotation is going to be fine. I'm not going to say they're going to be the best in baseball, but I just talked about this with the Phillies rotation. There was not one pitcher in their rotation that had under a 3.4 ERA. Their best pitcher was Zach Wheeler with a 3.46 ERA or 3.41 ERA. He was over a 3.4. Everybody else was higher. Yet the Phillies comfortably made a wild card. Now, their lineup is pretty damn good. But if you look at the guys in our lineup that had down seasons, if they hit to the back of their baseball cards, and I'm talking about the core, now I'm talking about around average, home runs, RBIs, doing their jobs, and Alvarez either is what he was last year or a little bit better. That's a little bit more offense that we didn't have last year. Because there was a lot of, you can't have McNeil, who is a guy that you need to hit 300 or better because he doesn't really do anything else offensively. You need him to bat the 295s, 310s, around that. You need Alonso to hit his 250, 240, 250 around his career average with his home runs and RBIs. Lindor, you need him to bet that 250 with his 25 to 30 and his 90 to 100 RBIs. Nimmo, you let him be that leadoff hitter if he can provide you with a little bit more power, which I would take a little less power and a little less strikeouts for Nimmo. I like him on base. Get on base for those big guys with Lindor and Alonso. That's important. Because I think if this lineup can provide about 4 to 4.5 runs per game, I think that is good news for the New York Mets. Again, don't look at it from a 162-game perspective with the New York Mets. Look at it from an 85-game perspective before the deadline. From March 28th until the deadline, which is about 3 months. Okay? April, May, June. 3.5 to 4 months. In that 85, 90-game period, that's what you got to look at. You got to get this team to the deadline within striking distance of a playoff spot. You do that, you have a chance of getting what you need, whatever that might be. If it's pitching, starters, bullpen, another bat, whatever you might need at the deadline. Whatever you need, the extra oomph at the deadline, you get it. I think that's important to realize. I think there's too many Met fans, and I see it on Twitter, that, are so concerned about everything else, worry about the first 80 to 85 games. You worry about that, you don't have to worry about the other 60, 70 games after the deadline, because that can be very irrelevant games or it can be very important games. But you can't get to that point of importance after the deadline of those games of importance. They're not going to be important if you don't do your job in the first 85 to 90 games before the deadline. That's what you got to know. What are they going to do? If they start off good, and I'm telling you guys right now, if you go back, and I talked about this earlier, if you go back, the Diamondbacks, the Cubs, the Padres, the Reds, look at their seasons by month and their records. Every one of those teams had one really, really, really good month. And I'm talking about 9, 10, 11 games over 500. 1 month. Really, really freaking good. Between 9 and 11 games over 500. Every other month was a game under 500 or a game over 500. Or 2 games under 500, 2 games over 500. They were never far below or above 500 except for 1 month. So what does that tell you? If you got a 10 or 11 games over 9, 10, 11 games over 500 month, the only thing you need to do is hover around 500. A couple of games below, a couple of games above 500 or at 500 of those other months. And you'll be right in the mix for a wild card spot by the deadline. That's it. It's not that difficult. Look at it. When an 84-win team gets the third wild card, regardless of what they did in the playoffs, Diamondbacks, miracle run to the World Series, great. But just get in. Because JL can tell you, all you got to do is get in. Doesn't matter if you're the best team in baseball, with the best record, the best offense, scary team in a short series, 5-7 game series, 3-5 or 7 game series, you can get picked off in the playoffs because all you need is that one good pitcher that shuts your team down, or the offense picks up and you got hot at the right time. That's what baseball is. Now, we don't like the whole new format, but it gives opportunity, like a team like the Mets, who can sneak in to a third wildcard spot, and if you make the right trades at the deadline, can make all the difference in the world. In 2015, when there was only 2 wild cards, and it didn't matter because the Mets won the division, but all they needed was that one bat in the lineup that changed everything for a 2015 team lineup that was embarrassing before the deadline. Things matter. Situations matter. The right trades matter. The Braves in 2021 made the right trades, not the big names, but the right trades at the right time. They traded for a whole new outfield. And it turned out one of them were an MVP in the World Series. They solidified that outfield, and it changed the whole perspective. 2022, look what the Phillies did. They had one of the worst bullpens in baseball that year. Got 1 or 2 guys, made the bullpen a little bit better. Their offense took off, took them to the World Series. They didn't win it. But guess what? They were another fringe wildcard team. You have to remember, it's not always about how you start. It's about how you finish. And in the Mets case, worry about getting to the deadline. Don't worry about game 112, 122, 140, because those games could be irrelevant after the deadline. Get to the deadline where you have the opportunity to add to this team for the important games after the deadline. You want to get to those important last 60 games of the season. You don't want irrelevant games. You have to remember, worry about the first 3.5 months, 4 months to the deadline. That's where you got to focus on, guys. So we got through all topics. Once again, spring training, February 14th, pitchers and catchers report. February 15th, full squad workout. Spring training opening day is February 24th. March 15th is the prospects game, where the best prospects on each team will be in a uniform, playing against another team's best prospects on that day. Pretty cool. At least the Mets will. I think it's between the 14th and the 17th where teams play each other with their best prospects. And March 28th, opening day, Mets Brewers 2024. With that said, Peralta gone. See if the Mets go out and get another reliever. They're looking at Woodruff. Rotation and bullpen. Health is important. Diaz projections are interesting. Around the 2.9, 3.10, 3.10 ERA is okay. Give me 30 to 35 saves. I think this bullpen is going to be fine. Rotation, 3/5, 3 out of the 5 needs to remain healthy. That includes Senga. And the offense, this core, can't have a month like June where they were nowhere to be found. Good news is, Grant, you'll be there on opening day. I'm like 60% sure I'll be going. I had some things that came up last minute that I have to take care of. I hope I can go. It would be very upsetting because I'm on a streak here going to spring training every year, minus the pandemic year. But damn it. I hope I can go. If I do go, I will obviously get in touch with you. We'll meet up. We'll hang out and all that fun stuff. So there we go. With that said, guys, another Mets Hot Stove in the books. January is in the books. Welcome to February. Spring training is upon us. Have a great night, guys. Let's go, Mets. See you next time. Happy February, guys. Let's go, Mets. Good night.
Meet the Mets, step right it up and greet the Mets.